but you will soon find that her roots go much deeper than the hills surrounding Park City. While she does call Utah her home, her heart still holds a distinctive place in the Deep South, where music, food, and muggy hot days have counterbalanced her life in mountains and hills. She's working on her Icebreaker speech. The objectives to begin speaking in front of an audience and to discover speaking skills you have and skills that need some attention. The time is 4 to 6 minutes. Please welcome Karri.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate being able to stand in front of you today, and I hope that my story will enlighten you as to who I am and why I'm here. Many years ago, a really good friend of mine started calling me the Big Fish, and it was in reference to a Tim Burton movie about an outrageous man who told these crazy stories about his life, and of which his son could not believe because they were so outrageous. It wasn't until the day of his father's funeral that he realized that most of his father's stories were true when all these crazy characters started to arrive at his funeral to pay their respects. Now, my stories aren't that outlandish, but my kids have started calling me the Big Fish because I keep coming up with these things that they never knew about me. My mother's family is Cajun French, and they're from Thibodaux, Louisiana. And they spoke only French during that time until they were in their late teens. My father's family is from Asheville, North Carolina, and my grandfather was a stand-up bass player in the big bands in New York City. My father almost became a professional musician, but decided to join the Marines and learn to fly airplanes. And soon after, I was born at a Marine base in Cherry Point, North Carolina. And after the births of my 3 little brothers and a few years in Pensacola, Florida, my father was recruited by Pan American Airways, and we moved to Los Angeles. It was in Los Angeles that my parents discovered skiing and Park City. And we, after 2 visits to Park City, my parents decided to leave LA and move to Park City and buy one of the 3 available houses for sale in town. They bought a house at the top of Park Avenue for $15,000. Wow. I was 8 years old when we moved here, and it was 1970, and this town didn't look anything like it does today. Naturally, me and my 3 little brothers became skiers and ski racers, and we were some of the first members of the Park City ski team. My father was also very much into adventure and the outdoors, and he took us to see every national park, state park, roadside point of interest in the entire West. And I should say that he didn't just take us there to look at these places. He loaded us up with backpacks and dragged us for miles into these places. One of our favorite spots was in Escalante, Utah, a place called Coyote Gulch, where we would backpack in for days on end just to play in waterfalls and run around on the sands and red rocks. It was really magical. The other parts of the summers that I wasn't blindly following my father into the wilderness were spent causing lots of trouble on the streets in Park City and spending time in New Orleans and staying close to my Cajun family. In the late 70s, my parents divorced, and wanting to be closer to my father, I moved to Lake Tahoe, where my ski racing career went to a much higher level. After I graduated from high school there, I spent 1 year there. I moved to Sweden, where I was able to train and travel with the Swedish national team and race as an American. There I learned to speak, read, and write fluent Swedish. I raced all over Scandinavia. I had several jobs. I worked in a local bakery. I planted trees in the forest. I painted the centers of hockey rinks. I coached young racers, and I hunted for the elusive butron berries up in this high Swedish forest. At the end of my stint in Sweden, I returned to Park City, where I was encountered with a major life event where my dad was in a serious hang gliding accident, and my brother died of a car accident. You may recognize his name from the Eric Hays Memorial Ski Race that occurs here every December. I spent a few years racing in town races and bartenders' cups, working in local shops and restaurants, coaching the farm team, and quite literally walking in circles before I decided to give ski racing one last shot. and I joined the Women's Pro Tour for 2 years. It was during that time that I met my sweetheart, Hays-Walzer, who was essentially a ski bum at the time. He was a rugby player, and he was a musician who played and sang the guitar in the local bars and restaurants. We were married in 1986, and 3 years later we had our first child, our daughter Samantha, and 11 months later I was pregnant with identical twin boys, Bridger and Travis. That's called 3 under 3, and you get a handicapped parking pass. Jack and I bought the house that I grew up in from my mother in the early 1990s, and we raised our family there. And somehow through the fog of raising 3 children in a tiny house in Old Town, I was able to do quite a bit. And the short list goes like this. Let's see, I acted and directed in Egyptian theater plays. Okay. I was a professional photographer, private ski coach, that makes sense. Started the recycling center, okay, I was one of those people. I organized the Earth Day Fun Run and Festival for 6 years, okay. I organized 2 live concert fundraisers at Abravanel Hall for Recycle Utah. I was in class 1 of leadership. I was one of the founders of PARC. I spent 4 years on the Park City Planning Commission. I served on several other local nonprofit boards. I mountain biked on Team Sugar. I wrote for local publications. I was a DJ and entertainment reporter for KPCW. I was a county reporter for the Park Record. I lead historic bike tours for White Pine Touring. I started playing the violin and the banjo, and I started 2 bands, Lash LaRue and John Boy's Mule. And in 2002, I decided to get a real job, and I worked for Berkshire Hathaway as a real estate agent. In the spring of 2012, Jack and I decided to sell our house in Old Town, and when we found a beautiful home on the Weber River in Peoa, Utah. It's a little slice of heaven, and we love living there. Our kids are all out of the house. And these days I spend my time playing music, riding my bike around the Camas Valley, and thinking about the time that I rode up the chairlift with Sting, and he gave me crap for being a banjo player. Big fish story? You decide.